Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum everyone. So let's just start our today's topic from the clinical chemistry, which is about the acid-base disorders. Before discussing our today's topic, let's just have a small recap of the previous lecture, which is about major buffer systems and the acid-base metabolism. So as we have discussed in our previous lectures, the major buffers which are present in our body. So first of all, let's define what is a buffer. A buffer is basically a solution. A buffer is basically a liquid, or buffer is anything which resists a change in the pH, a small change in the pH when a small amount of acid or base is added. So basically a solution that is resisting a change in pH when a small amount of acid or base is added in it. So the things which function as major buffers in our body are the bicarbonate buffer system, which includes bicarbonates, ion and the carbonic acids. Phosphate buffer system, which include phosphate ion and phosphoric acids. Protein buffers, that includes proteins which major functions as buffers. And last includes the hemoglobin buffer, in which hemoglobin functions as the buffer. So these are the major buffers of the system. Now let's discuss our basic terminology. Our basic terminologies, which is about acidemia and alkalemia. We know that our pH of the blood is in the range of 7.35 to 7.45. So whenever the pH of the blood gets decreased from 7.35, it leads to a condition that is called as acidemia. And whenever the pH is increased from 7.45, it will turn into a condition that is called as alkalemia. Now let's just discuss three more major terminologies. The PCO2, that means partial pressure of the carbon dioxide in the blood. CdCO2, that means concentration of only dissolved carbon dioxide in the blood. And CdCO2, that means the concentration of the total carbon dioxide. So up till now we have discussed only basic things about the major buffers of the body and some basic terminologies that we are going to cover in our next topics. So when we talk about acid-base disorders, we have to know about acid-base metabolism, that how these buffers act in our body to maintain the pH, in a narrow range. So that is called as acid-base metabolism. So in order to study acid-base metabolism, we need to understand the Henderson-Hasselbalch equation. The Henderson-Hasselbalch equation states pH is equals to pK dash plus log of concentration of salt over acid. This is the equation we have already discussed in our first year biochemistry and in our other multiple topics. So this equation pH is equals to pKa plus log of concentration of salt over acid. Basically this equation explains how the acid and base metabolism works in our body. So let's just discuss about the bicarbonate buffer system. In bicarbonate buffer system, we have the salt that is basically the bicarbonate ion and the carbonic acid. So carbonic acid is basically the carbon dioxide which is present in our body and it combines with water to form carbonic acid. So that equation becomes pH is equals to pKa, that is the dissociation constant of the acid, and that is already known. That is a known value which is 6.1 for the bicarbonate buffer. And then there is log of concentration of bicarbonates and log of concentration of dissolved carbon dioxide in our blood. And this ratio is 20:1. And when we get 20:1, log of concentration of 20:1, this answer will be 1.3. And then the equation pH is equal to 6.1 plus 1.3, and the pH finally becomes 7.4, which is in the range, pH normal range of our body. So the purpose of explaining all of this is to form the basis of the acid-base disorders. When we discuss acid-base disorders, first we have to learn this equation. Now, let's just have a general discussion about this acid-base disorder. So, in acid-base disorders, there are primarily two types of acid-base disorders that include two major components of our body. One of these is the metabolic component and the other is the respiratory component. So there are metabolic acidosis and metabolic alkalosis, and respiratory acidosis and respiratory alkalosis. So whenever we are going to study metabolic acidosis or metabolic alkalosis, the primary defect lies in the kidneys, and that involves the concentration of the bicarbonates. Doesn't matter it is acidosis or alkalosis, that involves kidneys or the bicarbonates. And whenever we are talking about the respiratory disorders, the respiratory acidosis or respiratory alkalosis, that involves lungs. And involving lung means changes in the partial pressure of the carbon dioxide that can either be increased or either be decreased depending upon the disorder. So now this equation forms the concepts of these acid-base disorders, metabolic or respiratory. Now let's just discuss. This is the pH. Now pH simply means the concentration of negative logarithm of concentration of the hydrogen ion. This is pKa or pK dash, that is the dissociation constant of the acid. That simply means low. Now here lies the major concept in this question. Concentration of bicarbonates ion and concentration of carbonic acid or the concentration of dissolved carbon dioxide. So as we have two basic conditions, acidosis or alkalosis, then it will be further divided into metabolic or respiratory. But there are basic two conditions, acidosis or alkalosis. Now what is acidosis and what is alkalosis? That simply means acidosis means decrease in the pH of the body and alkalosis means increase in the pH of the body. There are two. About acidosis and alkalosis, this equation will help us to understand the basics of the acidosis and alkalosis. So first of all, let's just clear our concepts about acidosis and alkalosis according to this equation. Now, there are two major conditions, acidosis and alkalosis, which can be further divided into metabolic acidosis, metabolic alkalosis, and respiratory acidosis and respiratory alkalosis. First of all, let's just the basic alkalosis. Alkalosis means increase in the pH and acidosis means decrease in the pH. Okay. Now there are only two conditions in our body. The first one is acidosis, that means decrease in the pH, and the other one is alkalosis, that means increase in the pH. So now let's just talk about the alkalosis. The pH is increasing. Now in this equation there are three variables. The first one is pKa, that is the dissociation constant of the acid. We cannot change this. This is a constant value. There are other two variables that basically ultimately define the pH. Now these are the concentration of the bicarbonate ion and the concentration of the carbon dioxide. As we are discussing about alkalosis, in which there is an increase in the pH, so that is a simple concept. When we have to increase this value, there are two values, numerator and denominator. So either we can increase the value of our numerator or we can decrease the value of our denominator. So there are two possibilities for increasing the pH. Either we increase this value of bicarbonates or decrease this value of the partial concentration of the carbon dioxide. Moving towards acidosis, decrease in the pH. Now decrease can be related to either decrease in the bicarbonates or increase in the carbon dioxide concentration. So moving towards, there are four conditions now in our body: the metabolic acidosis, metabolic alkalosis, respiratory acidosis and respiratory alkalosis. The metabolic simply means that the major defect lies in the metabolic compartment, and respiratory simply means the major defect lies in the respiratory compartment. Acidosis means decrease in the pH. Alkalosis means increase in the pH. Now this table will help you to understand all of these concepts of the respiratory acidosis, alkalosis, acid-base disorders and the major compensations. So let's just talk about the metabolic acidosis. As the term acidosis, that simply means decrease in the pH. Okay. Acidosis means increase in the concentration of the hydrogen ions. Okay. Two terminologies: decrease in pH, increase in the hydrogen ion concentration. Now, carbon dioxide concentration, that is basically the acidic compartment, that is formed basically by carbonic acid. So it increases, and the last bicarbonate ion concentration decreases. So these are the four major findings in the metabolic acidosis. So primary defect, as I have told you, it is metabolic. So primary defect lies in the kidneys, and kidneys controls the regulation of bicarbonates. So there is bicarbonate ion decreased in the respiratory metabolic acidosis. Causes, there are multiple causes of the metabolic acidosis. The major ones are the diabetic ketoacidosis or the diabetes. Now let's just talk about the compensations. This is the major portion, that whenever there is a problem in the acid-base disorder, let's just say there is a defect or there is a problem in our metabolic acidic compartment, then the respiratory portion, respiratory system will compensate, will form actions, will do some actions in order to minimize the action of the defect in the metabolic compartment. So when there is decrease in the bicarbonate concentration and increase in the partial carbon dioxide, our metabolic compartment do hyperventilation in order to decrease the carbon dioxide, partial pressure of the carbon dioxide. So finally this equation gets the low value and the pH value comes to the norm. Metabolic alkalosis, there is an increase in the pH, decrease in the hydrogen ion concentration, and that is alkalosis. So that means increase in the pH, decrease in the hydrogen ion, decrease in the partial pressure of the carbon dioxide, and increase in the bicarbonate. That's simply reversing. It's the reverse, it's vice versa. So primary defect lies in the bicarbonate increase, and it is metabolic. So it involves the metabolic compartment, kidneys, bicarbonate concentration increases. Causes includes primarily vomiting, and there is compensation, there is hypoventilation in that case, so that the partial pressure of the carbon dioxide increases. Simple. When an acidic substance is increasing, we have to increase our basic substance to get it normalized or neutralized. Same, when there is increase in the basic substance, we have to increase our acidic substance to get neutralized. Now, there is decrease in our basic substance and increase in our acidic substance. So we do compensation to decrease our acidic substance. In alkalosis, there is a decrease in the partial pressure of the carbon dioxide and increase in the basic component. So we do hypoventilation to increase our acidic substance. So we just only have to balance between acid and base, to balance these two things to get the things neutralized. Moving towards, there is respiratory acidosis and respiratory alkalosis. Now the primary defect lies in the respiratory compartment. And as we have defined acidosis alkalosis, so respiratory acidosis means decrease in pH, increase in hydrogen ion concentration, increase in the partial carbon dioxide, and decrease in the bicarbonate. Same as the acidosis. These four things, same for the acidosis, same for the acidosis. But the major difference is between the metabolic and respiratory, that simply relates to primary defect. There is a primary defect in the metabolic compartment involving kidneys, and in respiratory it involves major defect in the lungs. So there is increase in the partial pressure of the carbon dioxide, and it can be caused by COPD, that is a disease of the respiratory system, or there can be some airways obstruction that can lead to increased partial pressure of the carbon dioxide. So finally, when there is increase in the acidic substance, now kidneys start excreting hydrogen and start reabsorption, increasing the reabsorption of the bicarbonate. That's the compensation mechanism. So the acidic substance is increasing in our body, that causes the respiratory acidosis. So our kidney it start excreting the acidic compartment and absorbing the basic substance, so getting the things neutralized. Then last we have respiratory alkalosis. Respiratory alkalosis, increase in the pH, decrease in the hydrogen ion concentration, decrease in the partial carbon dioxide, and increase in the bicarbonate ion concentration, same as of these of the metabolic alkalosis. But the major difference between metabolic and respiratory is once again the major defect. Metabolic defect lies in the kidneys involving the changes in the bicarbonate concentration. Respiratory defect lies in the lungs involving the change in the concentration involving the change in the partial pressure of the carbon dioxide. So now the acidic substance is decreasing. So we have already at this point that when the acidic substance is decreasing, so in compensation, what our kidney do is it start reabsorbing our acidic substance and releasing or excreting the basic substance. That's just look here. It decreases the excretion of the hydrogen ion. It means it stop excreting hydrogen ion. It decreases its excretion of the hydrogen ion, and it decreases the reabsorption of the bicarbonates. So there is less reabsorption of the bicarbonates, or we can say that more excretion of the bicarbonates. Or there is less excretion of the hydrogen ion, or we can say that there is more reabsorption of the hydrogen ions to compensate the respiratory alkalosis, and it can be caused by at higher altitudes or a hyperventilation. This lecture, the brief overview of the major buffer systems, the bicarbonate, protein, phosphate and hemoglobin. The basic terminologies about the carbon dioxide concentrations, partial pressure and total concentration of the dissolved carbon dioxide. Acidosis and alkalosis, acidemia or alkalemia. The acid-base metabolism involving the Henderson-Hazelgage equation. These equations form the basis of these all acid-base disorders. Talking about the acid-base disorders, there are two acid-base disorders, metabolic and respiratory, metabolic acidosis or metabolic alkalosis. Respiratory acidosis or respiratory alkalosis. Four conditions: metabolic acidosis, metabolic alkalosis, respiratory, and these are the four major parameters or four major findings to find or to conclude that whichever disorder is there. So pH, hydrogen ion concentration, partial carbon dioxide and bicarbonates. These all can dictate, these all can help us to find that whichever condition is present. Now there is primary defect, metabolic primary defect in the kidneys involving changes in the bicarbonates, respiratory involve changes in the lungs in the partial pressure of the carbon dioxide. There are some causes of these conditions, and finally the important compensation. Whenever there is a problem in the metabolic compartment, the compensation lies in the lungs, and whenever there is the problem in the respiratory compartment, the major compensation lies in the kidneys. So this table can help you to understand the basics of the acid-base metabolism, acid-base disorders.